Meaningful to the core. So what meanings have you given to yourself? What representations, words, evaluations, and all the other distinctions have you attributed to yourself as a human being and as a performer? So we've got two facets here. Yourself as a human being, yourself as a person, and yourself as a doer. This is the difference between self-esteem and self-confidence. And most people don't make this distinction. Most psychologists don't make this distinction. But we're going to be mapping out that there's a difference between myself as a human being and my value and worth and dignity. All those words are going to be synonymous to my value, my worth, my dignity, my lovability, my preciousness, my beingness, and then my doingness, what I can do and achieve and accomplish, and my confidence that I can do or achieve or accomplish this or that, and feel good that I can do and achieve and accomplish, which is a good feeling, and is part of who we are as human beings, our sense of capacity, capability and power and resources. And something very different is who I am as a human being apart from what I can do. So one is self-confidence and one is self-esteem. Self-confidence is the feeling of faith, fideo, with faith in myself. I trust and have faith that I can do and achieve typing, public speaking, coaching, studying, reading a book, taking a walk. I've got those skills. So self-confidence is based upon skills.
Give us the definition again, the feeling of faith.
Faith in yourself. I can do this.
Having to do with
Capability. So I can do this. I believe in my capability. What I don't have self-confidence, I don't have any self-confidence in fixing a computer anymore. I don't have confidence in taking care of my car anymore. The way they've gotten so complex. I have no confidence in flying an airplane. I have no confidence in doing brain surgery. I have no confidence in doing artwork. You can see that. I have no confidence in standing up and playing an instrument or singing. I have no self-confidence. I would be nervous. I would be anxious. I would be insecure in attempting to do those activities because they're not my skill set. So confidence is about what you can do. Self-esteeming is about who you are as a human being and your self-value and your worthwhileness and your dignity. And most of us recognize right off that with a newborn infant, while the infant can't do anything, can't pay the bills, can't bring in some money for the rent, can't take the garbage out on Wednesdays, while the baby can't do anything, most of us value the baby as having ultimate worth and is lovable and precious and adorable. And we value the baby's person, even though self-confidence, there's none. So this is, I think, a very important distinction. Because then I can be a somebody when I can't have no confidence in a certain area, and I'm still okay with myself. And learning any new skill, we always feel incompetent. Because it's just the way that the levels of competency grow. We have to practice, we have to learn. We feel clumsy at first, we feel awkward, we don't know what we're doing, we feel confused. And it's just incompetence of a skill, but not incompetence as being a human being. So so if we make two sets of maps, one map's about all the meanings I'm going to give to myself as a human being. All the maps about that, and all the representations, all the language, all the metaphors. I'm just going to make this really rich that I'm a somebody. I don't have to prove anything. Now that's a whole different way of thinking, but it creates a grounding, solidness, meaningful to the core. If you don't do that, and your self-esteem is based upon what you do, then you'll always be riding that roller coaster. And then aging becomes a big problem. Because we all came in and we couldn't change our diapers, couldn't even roll over and squeal. And through life we develop skills and skills and skills, and then we go out the way we came in. I want to talk to somebody about that scheme. But if we separate doing from being, this is the basis of all reframing. Person is more than behavior. And so once you can make this distinction, then you can be great when you're making a mistake. You can be great when you're taking risks because your worthwhileness is not founded and based upon what you can do. So being and doing, and separating these two. So we'll make some other maps about myself as a human doing, and it is always conditional. It's conditional. Can you do it? Can you not do it? To what degree can you do it? To what quality can you do it? So it's all about performance, whereas the other is about being. So this allows us to build up three metastates, and you can see from the diagram there. First of all, self-acceptance, that my overall self, I'll accept myself, whatever my skills are, whatever the condition of my life is, and I'll accept myself as a human being, fallible, perfectly fallible. Perfectly, I love that, perfectly fallible. Drives perfectionists crazy. Perfectly fallible. Because I've got a brain liable to error. I've got a heart liable to error. I've got lips and tongue liable to error in the way I talk, and behavior liable to error. So I misthink, and I misfeel, and I misspeak, and I misbehave. That's one I love, misbehaving. Now I can be gloriously fallible. So once I'm gloriously fallible, then I won't be afraid of mistakes. Anybody afraid of mistakes? Anybody afraid of being seen to make a mistake? It's not a mistake, it's just being seen to make a mistake. Because what would that mean? We are a class of life that can be afraid of what something would mean if. So what we want to do is just get really solid and get grounded, meaningful to the core, and give such meanings to our fallibility. What do you need to think and feel and language and create metaphors for your fallibility so you're okay as a fallible person? So as you give those meanings, then you'll be free to go try things and experiment. And so this will help us to be meaningful to the core so that then we'll be ready to turn loose and unleash and experiment and play and discover, because that's how the self-actualization will work. It takes a lot of experimenting and playing and finding out what you're good at, finding out what you're not good at, which is a good learning, so that we can just find our path as we go. So this is meaningful to the core. We're essentially going to create three meta states: self-acceptance, self-appreciation, to appreciate what you can do. I know some people who discount as a cognitive distortion and personalize and awfulize because they're always looking around for, well, he can do that, and I can't, and he can do that, and she can do, and they start making lists of all as they compare and seeing all the competencies that they don't have. So then they bring self-contempt or self-loathing or self-hatred or self-disgust or whatever other negative meta state, and put themselves, so whatever gifts they do have, because they're not counting them, valuing them, appreciating them, they're never developing, playing to those strengths because they're so focused on what they don't have. So we'll bring self-appreciation to appreciate what we can do, and to measure ourselves against ourselves instead of others, and then we'll bring self-value and esteem to ourselves to really get this solid. Because to go into the crucible, it takes a lot of ego strength, and ego strength means your sense of self, your sense of I, can look at whatever is without falling apart. So to do that, you have to have acceptance, appreciation, and esteem, and then we can go into the crucible and look at, well, I don't have these gifts, and And here's some of the things that I don't have to play. And the deck of cards that life has dealt me, I have to deal with this and I have to deal with that. And instead of working ourselves up into a real hate and rejection of whatever those things are, we can just accept and then focus on what we can do. So it takes a lot of ego strength to enter into. It takes a lot of self-esteem to be humble. And so that's what we're going to be building up with this particular pattern. So who would like to work with me, and I'll do a demonstration of self-acceptance, self-appreciation, self-esteem, and you're ready to do that? Okay. So, Barbara, as you think about yourself as a doer and yourself as a human being, are these well separated and sorted out, or do we need to really sort these out and make some real distinctions here?
I get really frustrated with my lack of skill sometimes.
Okay, you get frustrated with your lack of skills, and do you personalize that? That it's something about you as a human being?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so there's a temptation to do a little personalizing.
Yeah.
Okay, so are you ready to have a whole new way of operating?
Okay.
Okay. What I like doing with this particular process is setting some anchors on your arm. So if I can use your arm and move up and down so that and everybody has in their manuals this continuum between accepting and appreciating and then esteeming. So if we talked about having more and more confidence, and we went more and more confidence and more confidence, does that feel right, or more and more confidence? More and more.
Oh, yeah.
You like this?
No.
You're an upper.
Yeah.
Okay, you're an upper. Some people are outers. but this feels, if we were talking about more and more graciousness and charm, more and more, more and more. That feels right. All right. So I'm going to let this be a continuum from moving to low to middle to high, because these three states of acceptance and then appreciation and then awe tend to be on a continuum moving up, because as you move up, we are saying, I like this, I really like this, I love this, because it's going to increase in intensity. So I'm going to access three states: acceptance, appreciation, and awe. And then we're going to bring these back to you.
Okay.
As a woman, as a worker, as a human being. So first of all, I'd like you to think and do whatever works best for you, whether you want to look at me and defocus or look here, and just think about something that you just accept. And acceptance is an interesting kind of emotion, as we just accept. I always shrug my shoulders. I got to take the garbage out. It's raining, grab an umbrella. And so I accept it, and so I just turn my hand that way and kind of shrug my shoulders, and my breath is kind of shallow, and my voice is, okay. So it's a very, very gentle little feeling of just accept. So think of something that maybe once you didn't accept, and you rejected and disliked, but now you just accept. Okay, so think of that, and just notice the state you're in. What is the gesture you use? I use this kind of stuff. Okay, so just accepting. Okay. Sometimes you look at something and you don't just accept it, you really appreciate it. So as you think about something you really appreciate, it could be a pleasure, a value, something really wonderful, something that you melt in appreciation. And it's just like this is good. Okay, you got something like that? Appreciation. And notice the breath of appreciation. The muscle tension of appreciation, the state of appreciation, the face of appreciation, the eyes, when you look at something and you just appreciate. Okay, so the feeling of appreciation, okay. Sometimes when we take something we appreciate and we move it up, or we move to something that's just as awesome, something that is just so incredible, it's just almost, we're speechless before it. A birth or a sunset or just something so valuable, so incredible that... And notice what it's like when you feel that sense of awesomeness, just standing in awe of something. You know it is so important. So you got that? Okay. So I'm going to interrupt the state now, having set 3 anchors on that continuum, and I want to test it to see if she has this well access. So when you think of appreciation, when you think of acceptance, when you think of awesome, there's a small difference there. Okay, so can you go to those pretty easily? Okay, so those are different states. Okay, so now I'm going to use those states to bring them to you. So this will be a little strange. I'd like you just to close your eyes and think about your life and the cards life has dealt you, the gifts that you have, the gifts that you don't have, and just feel this. Feeling this about the life that you have, the body that you have, the time that you were born on this planet, the skills you have that you don't have. Just feel this. Because you could reject it, hate it, get all worked up, or you could feel this and just accept the fact that here's what I've got to deal with. Now, there are some gifts and some skills that you can really appreciate because this is where you're best at. You're more fully yourself. And it's things that bring out your best and enable you to really have those peak experiences where you just melt in appreciation for your thoughts, your brain, your emotions, your speech, your behaviors, the things you do well, the ways you can touch the lives of people. So just appreciating that. When you appreciate the skills you do have, the things you do have to contribute, I wonder what else you could accept. Just to accept in a gentle, gracious way, just accepting that, knowing you have all these things to appreciate about your skills, what you can do effectively, powerfully. And then I'd like you just to feel this about yourself as a human being. What if you stood in awe of the majesty, the miracle, the wonder of who you are as a human being? And this wonderful experience that we call life, just standing in all of that. How awesome is the trillions of connections we have in our brain and all the possibilities that are there. And feeling that you're a somebody, that you have dignity and worth. It's a given. You are born with it. Wonder what else you can appreciate. Because you don't have to prove anything, but you can experience and express everything. Because you are awesome as a human being, fallible, wonderfully fallible, and now you can appreciate the things you can do. And feeling both of these feelings, all for yourself and appreciation as a doer, I wonder what else you can accept. More gently, more graciously, just welcome in and acknowledge as something I have to deal with. And dealing with it with the skills and the abilities. And knowing that however wonderful this is, you're somebody. You count. You amount to something. You have unconditional value. Now, feeling all of that, feeling the awesomeness, feeling the appreciation, and just the acceptance of things, imagine taking that with you in the days and the weeks to come. Imagine moving week by week, just knowing this. Looking for things to feel this about. And just moving out in an accepting way. And how's that? Okay. Think about something that normally, when that would have occurred, maybe you'd do a little personalizing or feel bad about yourself. And as you do that, make sure you feel these and notice how this will change that. How's that? Okay. Are you ready to be gloriously fallible?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So this is a pattern we use in metastates. It's a very common pattern, and some of you probably have been through it. Any questions on how to do it? We're making a key distinction between self as a person, self as a doer, performer, and we're bringing two different emotions to sort that out.
then did you go back and forth between acceptance and esteem?
Yeah.
Speak up.
So asking about the coordination between the different anchors between acceptance, appreciation, and esteem. I always start with acceptance to essentially say, let's just accept where I am, the cards life has dealt me, just acceptance. And so we'll get the acceptance feeling. When you go for that, find some behavior that you or the person does. Mine is just like that. If you have difficulty, always do contrast. If you didn't accept, what would you be doing? Well, probably rejecting it and getting myself worked up. Okay, so show me worked up. Okay, now accept. Because you want to find what is the physiology of acceptance. So as you think about something that maybe you once have just rejected, hated, spent a lot of mental and emotional energy, could be traffic, could be the rain, could be, it's those kinds of things that are just irritating, could be the taxes, or just accept it. So find that state and bring that upon yourself and your life and what you have to deal with. Appreciation will invite you, as in the previous exercise, find something of value, something significant, something meaningful. And once again, you'll want to get a little bit of coaching of the body. Give me the eyes of appreciation, the voice, the posture, the movement. I'll move to appreciation on a person's arm, move up there holding appreciation, and then once again bringing the acceptance by saying, notice, appreciating what you can do very, very well. What else can you now just accept? Just welcome in and embrace, because you can focus on these things that you appreciate. So I'll be playing musical arms. Same thing with that sense of awe or that sense of esteem, that sense of value. Holding that, notice what you can appreciate now. Because it's not about what you can do. You already are somebody. So I'll use a pressure anchor. That is, it's not just touch. Oftentimes I'll just have my hand on their arm, and then when I'm talking about that, I'll push down. I'll have a pressure. So the pressure itself is the anchor. Jim?
It's not a sliding, it's just three different.
Well, and then I'll slide sometimes up and down, just depending on how much I want to play today. This facilitates the process of building this up and sorting out person from behavior. And that's the key. Then we can be meaningful to the core. So myself as a person, I'm meaningful even if I can't do anything. But from this fact that I'm meaningful, now I can find meaning in the things I can do. And they become more significant. And that's what we want to do with this.
On the awe state, are we looking for something they've already experienced or something they aspire to? Or
look for something they've already experienced. When have you just been struck with a sense of awesome? It's just awesome.
awe about yourself or awe
No,
about
all about
external?
something out there that you have this feeling of this is so valuable. And so we're going to catch that feeling and then bring back to self.
Oh.
Now, if you have any difficulty with this, check permission. Because some of us don't have permission to feel that about us. Because we may be afraid what that would mean. So you might want to give yourself permission to value that. If you can hold a baby and value it just in an absolute ultimate way of being loving and precious and valuable and having human worth and dignity and conditioned upon nothing except being human, then you can do that to yourself. And that's what, so sometimes using that as a reference, because that's what we want to do. Most of us, and sometimes it's almost an occupational hazard of wanting to achieve a lot. We're so hard on ourselves. We're so rough. We treat we wouldn't dare treat another person the way we treat ourselves. They'd slap us good if we talked or treated them that way. And so being kind and gentle and loving and affirmative and valuing, this is not egotism, this is not selfishness, this is just acknowledging our human reality that begins the unleashing. I always like to say, I don't remember joining the human race. I don't remember taking the test and signing up and pledging to be a good human member of the human race. I think I was just born human. It's a given. So that may be some of the language you want to bring. It's a given. So,
Some folks bring a spiritual, religious
Yeah.
background that talks about the sin of pride. How do you reframe that objection?
well, depending upon which religion, I'll go and use the very scriptures, that way. But in the Judeo-Christian perspective, we're made in God's image and likeness. So I would bring those thoughts to it. But I would find, because every religion I know values the human being as a spark of divinity, as stardust in the universe, and so our value is a given. And that pride usually is asserting something that's not true of me. And it's usually about behavior. So arrogance, in contradistinction to assertiveness, I just assert what is, but arrogance is I arrogate to myself something that's not so. And that's the sin of pride.
And then in the last step, you have them choose something that they want, that they feel self-doubt about. And then,
It's a way of testing.
And then fire the three so they can see esteem and what they're self-doubting.
Yeah.
Or feel esteem and what they're self-doubting.
Yeah. So this is a way of testing to see if they've got that.
So they can feel all three states while thinking about that.
Yeah.
Unresourceful.
So we're going to test the work to see. Think about something that when it has happened in the past, when you tended to personalize or feel bad about it. As you see that, feel acceptance. Here's just something to play with. Feel appreciation of your skills. What skills can I handle this with? And feel a sense of awe that is not about you. It's just some event that's occurring, and it takes nothing away from your worth and dignity. And so we're going to test it to see how is that. Is this strong enough to handle that? So,
Unresourceful state then?
the metastating is the acceptance, appreciation, esteem, and now we're going to ground it with something that previously might have threatened it. So we're going to see if we're going to test it, see if it works. Okay.
So the desired outcome is to be able to use those three metastates with a less than desirable aspect about ourselves.
Yeah. And what would trigger that less desirable? What gets you thinking that way, feeling that way, that you would personalize or feel bad? Now think about that with this. So now we're going to metastate this up against that primary state. So let's do 15 minutes each. 15 minutes, give you plenty of time. Well, first of all, I want to find out how did that go. Okay, went well. Any questions?
A long question. Actually, it's a long answer. It's a short question. Would you just run by, real quick, step by step, when to anchor, so that I have it correctly in my mind?
Okay.
When to anchor, where and when to anchor.
In this particular instance, we're using what we call a sliding anchor, so that the arm, as it were, becomes a continuum from low to middle to high. And because the continuum there on liking and welcoming into your world, when you accept it, and liking is going to be real low and welcoming is going to be real low, but you welcome it. Whereas if you took it further, it would be rejection. And then when you appreciate it, you're really welcoming it in your world and really liking it. And then when we move up to awe or esteem, we bring it in, but we're in such a state of, it's just awesome, we're almost speechless and beyond words. So by setting three anchors and by setting it as a slide, the skin gets the message more and more and more, or less and less and less. And so as we set that as an anchor, and then can, especially if you use a pressure anchor, it's anchoring a state, and in this instance 3 states: acceptance, appreciation, and awe. And so pressing down when the person goes more into the state, pressing down, and then you use it as a communication. I want you to feel this, and as you press that, so and then you're linking things. So anchoring is just a linking of an emotional state or emotional frame and all the thoughts that go along with it to something else. So by asking a person, think about your life generally and the cards that life has dealt you, and feel the sense of acceptance, to build up some self-acceptance of that. And so you could spend a long time on this pattern. Usually the meta coaches will spend a whole hour, maybe an hour and a half with this pattern, just really driving it in so that a person, because self-esteem is mostly a meta feeling and not a primary feeling. When I used to have a practice, people would come in and say, I have low self-esteem, and they say, what are you going to do? And I say, well, how low is it? Is it? And I'd go through this, is it down to your calf? If it's down to your ankle, this is going to take forever. And of course, it was to interrupt them to say, well, where is it? And, well, it's not a feeling. Self-esteem is not a feeling. It's a judgment. You're esteeming yourself, your concepts of you. It's a judgment of value. And just like when you're an appraiser and you go appraise, this house is now worth this, or this car is now worth this, or this diamond is now worth this, you're making an appraisal. So self-appraisal, self-esteem, and to esteem yourself highly is a judgment. So you're that far away from self-esteem. Are you going to do it or not? Now, I like other esteem. Does everybody like other esteem? Sure. How many still like me? But other esteem is not a self-esteem. So we know a lot of movie stars who had lots of fans, but they were in self-contempt. Because their judgment was that they're worthless or no good or is a fake or whatever it is. So self-esteem is an evaluation that we make, and you have to make it. Nobody can do that for you. So it's an evaluation. So we're trying to get that feeling of when you make an evaluation, this is just awesome. Now let's take that high value of appraisal and bring that and set that as a frame. I'm of high value. And then find some words that'll integrate it. It might be religious words. I'm made in God's image and likeness. It may be more spiritual type of things. I'm made out of the dust of the universe, so that makes me important. Or it might be, my worth is a given. But most of us have to language it in some way. I'm a somebody. I count. And we frame. Now, if you heard that from your parents, you count. You're a somebody. Then you probably integrate it, and it's just your frame. But if you don't have that, then you need to build that.
Should you anchor the 3 spots individually before you start doing the slide?
Wouldn't make any difference, really, I don't think.
Okay, so you can go ahead and start, then just move it up, lightly press down a little bit more to create the... Okay.
Yeah. Because then it has a degree of acceptance, degree of appreciation, degree, so it's...
You need to keep them separate. Like when you're talking about things that people accept, that's kind of like one set of things, and then things that they appreciate is kind of a different set. Things that all are a different set. And then in the pattern, have you ever used this pattern to get someone to take something they just accept, or is it just and then move it to all, or is this just mainly the pattern you get those feelings of that, and then the whole purpose of the pattern is just to bring it to yourself? I mean, that's the purpose of the pattern. Right?
I usually leave it open by saying, now that you can appreciate what's your strength, what's good, what's unique and special about you, and you can appreciate that, notice what else you can accept. And a lot of people start realizing, I don't need to waste my energy rejecting and fighting the universe for the cards dealt. I can accept a lot of this. And sometimes when we go to awe, as you stand in awe of yourself as a human being and appreciate these things, what else can you accept? And sometimes the things that they just barely accepted now come up. I can appreciate this. Because actually, out of that difficulty, that trouble, that hurt, that pain, actually that's what has built this new skills that I can appreciate. And so, so I like just leaving it open, feeling this appreciation, notice what else you can accept. Feeling this all, notice what else you can appreciate. And what we're doing is adding richer meanings to life.
You from one to the, you don't skip to like on to just accept.
It is a building up, so it's moving up. So that seems to be an easier movement than jumping too much. But you can do the jumping. I think it'll work just as well.
So when you inquire into the cards that you've been dealt, that they're tough, for you to accept, and is it good to say like, well, it's like hearing you, it's almost, it seemed to me that it was good to kind of, can you see those things, like how many are those things, you don't have to say it, but that way, when you can say, well, out of those things, is there anything that you can accept? And then maybe one, let's say out of the three things, pops up into acceptance, but the other two are still rejected. I don't know. I'm just wondering if there's any way to identify, is there anything still left over here in the reject pile? Or
Rejection is an interesting emotional state when you reject something. Because usually it takes a lot of energy. I got to remember my list of the things I hate, and I work myself up, and this is just wrong. And so so if you think about the energy you waste, the mental space you waste on storage, and all the other things, most of us have been there though. Is you start thinking about the things that you do not accept and that you work up. It's a great way to drive across Kansas or some Montana or some of these places around here. You need to have adrenaline and stay awake, but otherwise I don't know the value of it. But asking a person, what about yourself do you reject? What do you hate? What do you contempt? What do you despise? So that if a person does not have a real good sense of self and mapping of self, just asking the specifics. Well, I hated that this happened in my childhood, or my dad treated me this way, or whatever it is that a person is fighting, and maybe even let's step aside. Being in that state, having those frames, does that serve you well? Does that make you a more pleasant person to be with? Does this make life a party? And do that quality control. To invite a person to, is it time for the fight to be over? And then acceptance is not condoning, and acceptance is not permitting, it's just acknowledging what is. It's not resignation. So some people, when they try to get to acceptance, they're just resigning. That's the way it is. And they've just resigned. Or they say, now I've got to, if I forgive him, if I forgive her, that means I'm condoning what they did. So meanings, it's all about meanings. So then I'm going to play around with, how do you release it? How do you let it go? Because there's a chain between you and you're dragging that person everywhere and spending all this energy. Does that make life a party? So how can we get over to where you just acknowledge that happened, something I went through, and just accept it? And so I will name those things if I'm working with someone and they've got those kinds of things. As you feel this, I want you to think about what, and I'll make it specific, your father, that person, or whatever. I want you to just accept that. It happened. And bring acceptance to it. Acceptance, for a good part, just lets it go and stops the fight and all the energy and all the waste of energy. And one thing that will prevent us from self-actualizing, because if you've got all that going on, it's hard to turn around to say, what do I want that'll bring out the best in me? If you're so tied to some hate, resent. The word resent is to feel it again. Resentiment, to feel it again and again and again. And this is not the way to bring out the best. And so forgiveness is not for the other person. is to make my spirit clean and to release me from whatever happened. And so I do it for my own cleansing so that my pipes don't get rusted with all that stuff going on. So this is a good pattern for playing with that. The continuum there is a continuum between, if you're way over there to rejection and you're pushing things out of your world, to when you're resigning and things come in but you don't, to where you just accept, and then when you find what you can appreciate. So it's as now we fill up our world with good things and we take charge of that. On page 34, I've created a second edition of the meaning scale, but this one is about self, meaning scale about self. So same meaning scale from 0 to 10, and as you can see, the level of meaning. Now some of us live kind of conventional meanings. That was on the other scale. Conventional, just, the stuff in culture, the stuff that we're culturalized to, and it's just conventional. Below conventional is, kind of trivial meanings that we live our life by. This one here has a different one, and you can see when you're normal, when you're okay, when you're average, or below that, well, nothing special, or bland, or self-judgment, or sick of self, and as we go down the meaning scale, and then when we go up the meaning scale to where we can claim our uniqueness, our lovability, being a somebody, being an awesome human being full of potential, and then the feelings that will come from that as we feel that meaning. So as you gauge yourself as to how much meaning you've given yourself, because you'll never leave home without yourself, and the meanings and how meaningful you are. Beware of the person who leaves his home without themselves. Multiple. Left 3 of me back. So it's getting late in the afternoon, isn't it? So this is a meaning scale, so you can qualify the quality of meanings you give to you. And so to self-actualize, as we get this existential question, who am I, and what am I worth, and what am I about, and what am I doing, as you settle the fact that your worth is a given, now you can get out there to find what you can do and just give yourself to it and actualize those potentials so that you can become more. When it comes to the meaning, that's what we've been doing today. We're going to start performing those meanings, but every great self-actualizer, every person living a self-actualizing life, that is a life that is lived to be the best you, to create that best version, those people have learned that it is the meanings that they're living for that's the key. So I've been studying, just like Abraham Maslow did. Maslow did extensive studies for years and years and years on people he considered self-actualizing people. And people who are famous, people who seem to be using all their capacity, living in the moment, living fully, being creative. And so he studied just hundreds and hundreds. And since then, there's been many other people who have studied self-actualizers. So I've been doing a little bit of that with more contemporary people. So I've read many biographies, and as I read Lance Armstrong's biography and his first book It's Not About the Bike, he was a pretty world-class athlete, but he had only won one little facet of the Tour de France, and he was pushing, and then he got cancer. And in his book he says, it was the best thing that ever happened to me in my life to get cancer. Because he said, cancer taught me something. Cancer taught me I had never lived fully. I had never given it 100%. Cancer taught me I have so many days. I have so many opportunities. I have so many chances. Cancer was the very best thing because it taught me to live fully this day. That was his crucible. But his crucible he couldn't have operated unless he was a meaning maker, unless he knew how to give it great meanings, rich meanings, robust meanings. And I know that he had already developed some of that power because as I read his biography, even before he did the Tour de France and won it, before then, he started developing some things, and he realized, one of the things he realized, that when he was riding in France and some of the other places, and he realized that when it was a rainy, misty day and it was cold and it was blowing, everybody was going to suffer. And he found one of his talents. His talent was, he was a pain junkie. And he realized, and so he would wake up in the morning, it was raining and blowing and cold, and he would say, great, they won't be able to endure as much pain as me. Talk about meaning. What meaning would you have given it? Raining. But that was the meaning he gave it. He also had certain meanings about his team and how he appreciated teamwork and the playing of the team and how the team supported people. And he learned that the hard way by not being a team player, and then he learned how to be a team player. The meanings we give to something is everything. Because you'll feel those meanings, and then that'll create the skills and the competencies and the things that we can do. So the meanings we give to it. Another person that has really impressed me has been Steve Irwin, and I've read a couple of his biographies. I've read a lot of the stuff when he died last September. I was in Sydney when the news came of his death, and of course, having 500 million people attend to a zookeeper. That self-actualization as a zookeeper. Who would have thought that somebody who loved animals, who cared about conservation, who wanted people to understand animals, but his gift as a little boy was that he just had a sense of animals. And he gave him, that was the meaning, to be a crocodile hunter, to be a warrior for the wilderness, a wilderness warrior. And so that was his meaning. And as he learned to develop his skills and it gave him that meaning, he didn't aim for that kind of notoriety. But people saw his passion with the animals. They saw his love with the animals. And so he was actualizing a lot of his gifts. One of the things that really came out at his death was the fact that for years he had been making millions of dollars and buying up acres and acres and thousands of acres and tens of thousands of acres to preserve forever as wilderness and as conservation, to protect. Because that was his passion. Living for your passion is the secret for unleashing potential. But the question becomes, what is your passion? What turns you on? What excites you? And once you get over conventionality and being average and trying to fit in and get approval and finding, well, what is unique? What do I love doing? And then giving great meanings to it. So the meanings will get you out of bed every morning because it's your chance to seize that day fully and completely, being who you are. So meaning is the first thing. Then we'll start performing it. We'll go through the crucible to be able to transform whatever that energy is tomorrow. And then the next day we're going to be performing it. But the first thing is meaning. And what we've been focusing on today is really claiming our meaning-making powers. The movies you play in your mind, the words you use, how you edit it, the language you use, the frames you set, the emotions you connect, the evaluations. And as you just become aware of how you layer this and stepping back and having good quality, this will be the key to unleashing potential. So how rich are your meanings? Do you have some inspiring meanings that'll wake you up in the morning and excite you about whatever you're doing? Do you have exciting, inspiring meanings about relationships, about health, about fitness, about money, about whatever it is, whatever the lower need is? If you've got some inspiring meanings, that'll be the first key for unleashing those kinds of potentials. And so that's what we're going after, claiming those powers. So the first thing, and it may take a few weeks to really just start watching, where does your mind go when anything gets triggered? Just watch where your mind goes in the movies. Because if you can watch that reflexive awareness and how you build, you'll start to realize the frames that you've been living in. And so just watching it, just noticing where your brain goes and all these different tools that you have for doing that. Tomorrow we'll talk about the lower needs inside the pyramid before we pop out, but it's the higher meanings that you give to the lower needs that even affect your physiology and your experience with those lower needs. Because after we're 2 or 3 years old, we never experience the lower needs in a pure, innocent way again, but always as filtered through our meanings. And that can either leash you or unleash you for new potentials. To live at the level of the lower needs is actually to live, for the most part, a subhuman life. Because then it's just about food, drink, shelter, safety, group, connection, and acknowledgement of who you are. And we're made for more. We are made for more. And so as we make sure that the meanings we give even to those things serve us instead of overloading them with meaning. So that's where we're going to go. Let me open it up for some comments, questions. Any things we need to tie up for today?
Well, the thought that came to my mind while you were just saying that about the lower needs. So if a person loses their job and they choose to meditate that with an awfulizing frame of mind, I mean, how awful that is. I mean, how awful that is.
Yeah. So one of the ways we can really torture ourselves, bringing some really hurtful, toxic meanings, so that now we have two problems. I don't have a job, and I have just toxified my very self into awfulizing it so that who would hire me? So now I've got two problems instead of just one of dealing with whatever it is. So on the last day and in your notes, we've got a lot of stuff about problem solving. Because one thing about actualizing is really looking for problems and using our resources to deal with problems. So part of our nature is to solve problems. And if you don't have a problem, you'll look for one. I mean, what do we love? We love puzzles. We love testers. What are some of the biggest shows on TV? All these game shows. We like a problem to solve. So it's in our nature, and if your goal is to be problemless, you got a big problem. It's almost a death penalty to human nature and passion to have nothing. A problem is something thrown in the way. Problem is pro in the Greek, and bolium is to throw. It's just something in the way to deal with. And so like a mathematical problem is a test. It's something that calls forth our potentials to work on. And so our problem-solving skills. And if we get it without a job, if I just use my problem-solving skills, who do I know? What's my skill? What's my strength to play? And get in the best place and interview well if I use my problem-solving. But if I metastate it with all kinds of cognitive distortions and overload it, then it'd probably be just chance that somebody needs me that bad. So, there was one hand over here, then I'll come back over here.
So going back to the person versus doer, getting away from associating self-esteem to what you're doing. If you're doing something, you don't feel you're doing it well, the solution to that was just having a strong sense of person. Is that what we decided?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I was going to say relationship problem. There ain't no such thing as a problem, only upside down opportunities.
Okay. So give it that meaning.
Give it that meaning, yeah.
And it becomes different.
And it changes the whole frame.
Yeah. So as you think about something you want to unleash, to be unleashed from, to be unleashed to, you're setting a goal. Here's something I want to achieve or accomplish. It may be something external that you can measure it by, I want this and that at a certain time, and use the well-formed outcome pattern in NLP. Or it could be, I want a state. I want a state of mind. I want a state of emotion so that I can be at my best and resourceful. I want to be unleashed from this unresourceful state. I want to be released to a more resourceful state so that I can handle things. As you think about that and really hone in on that, looking at the meanings you give to each side, because it's the meanings that will determine the energy that you have, and as well as the meta level fears or drivers on either side of that. So as you look at that and work with that, tomorrow we're going to take our energies into the crucible. First we'll build a crucible in the construct of meaning so that we can hold a space for ourselves. As you've noticed today, there might have been times when it was hard to hold the space for yourself or another. Anybody notice that? We're just holding the space and being present to another person. And it's such a skill for a coach, just to hold the space, because then transformation can occur as you hold that space. What we just did with meaningful to the core, if you know that every person you interact with and hold and have conversation with is an incredible, fantastic, awesome human being, you can hold that space. Even if you hate their behaviors, hate what they've done, hate the way they express themselves, all those expressions, if you know that inside that core there is a valuable, precious human being, because if we don't do that, we'll actually make things worse. Because our judgment on them, just like our judgment on ourselves, makes it worse. So this is where being able to help to someone else to actualize their own potential becomes really a critical piece. So the meanings that we give to things. Other questions on that as we wrap up this afternoon?
I have a question on page 36. We talk about meaning versus performance, and the meta states of mismatching and matching. How is mismatching meaning and matching performance?
Okay, so on page 30, is it page 36 you said?
36.
The very last pages in this first day introduce the meta programs that are part here. You'll notice that there's 11 meta programs on page 36 at the top, meaning and performance. And if we take a continuum and bend it in half, so if we started with a meta program, and you can see the first one is global and specific, two ends of a continuum. But if we bend it in half so that we move it out like this, and we got global here and specific or detail here, then the space in between is going to be actually where we synthesize both of these polarity responses. And this is what starts to create the synthesis for self-actualization. Now, the reason for these 11 on each side is when you think about creating meaning, meaning is usually getting that big picture, that global sense, that generalization, and it means this. Whereas performance is, how are you going to detail that out? Where are you going to detail that? So performance is more in details and specifics. So the next one is options. What are all the options I have? What would be the procedure by which I can make this happen in my actual behavior? The steps. Intuitors versus sensors. Intuition, a general sense of meaning, my intuitive sense of what's going on, versus senses, smell, taste, sight, hearing, senses at the empirical level. And that's where behavior occurs. Possibility is up here when we think in possibilities and potentials, and what are the constraints? What are the necessities? What do I have to do to make that so in behavior? So each of those are these meta programs that fit either the meaning orientation or the performance orientation. So internal, going up and internal, imagining and thinking the possibilities, or external. Where in the world will I put this into play? So internal game, mental game, versus external outer game. Reflective, so once again inside, intuiting and reflecting, versus active and making it happen in the world. Being, doing. Perceiving, and out there judging, that is getting the world to adjust to me. Judging and making it happen. In time, I'm just lost in time, I'm just in the eternal moment. There is no time. And then through time, sequencing it when and where and how in my calendar. Up here, mismatching. What else is there? And what else? And then coming out to what fits and is the same as this internal plan that I can now make happen. Qualitative, quantitative. So these 11 meta-programs, 11 filters, helps to identify where you are. So go back to page 11, and this will help us to, is it 11? 10. Page 10, you can do a profile on yourself. So page 10, as we go up the meaning scale versus the performance scale, as you identify your meta-programs, it'll help you to identify which quadrant you are. So the more you have those 11 that are in the meaning one, you'll be more up there in the creators, the dreamers, because you're creating meaning. What you'll need to do is to turn it into performance. If you have more of the ones that are out on the performance axes, you'll probably need to create more meaning. So you'll be in the high performers, or if you overdo it, the compulsives and the workaholics. And so this will somewhat profile where you are. Does everybody know where to put yourself? How many creators do we have? You're in quadrant, what is that, 3? Quadrant 3. How many creators do we have? How many are real extreme and you're dreamers? You don't get much done, but you're a great dreamer. Okay. How many performers do we have? How many are people who take out? You're movers and shakers. You get things done. May not be too meaningful, but you get things done. Okay. Your tendency will be to get things done, and your meta-programs will be there. So to synthesize and to move into quadrant 4, you'll need to add so much more meaning. The things we've done today for you performers will seem kind of hard and internal stuff and intuitive stuff and not real, because it's not empirical and sensory and detail and procedure. It won't seem so real. Those of you who are creators, what we've done today is like, this is a piece of cake, creating meaning and dreaming, coming up with great plans. Now turning it into action will be the challenge. So knowing where you are on these two axes. And so the aim will be to synthesize, to do both, and have both, and to expand the flexibility of your consciousness to do both. And so the meaning I'm suggesting is if you set the frame that I can do both, it doesn't have to be global or specific, options or details, mismatching or matching. It doesn't have to be an either-or choice, but I can do both, and I can do both simultaneously. I first learned this from Robert Dilts. Robert Dilts wrote 2 or 3 books on strategies of genius. And when he wrote his book on Walt Disney and the modeling of Walt Disney, Disney was able to walk into the graphics room where all his artists were drawing little mice and other little characters for the cartoons. And he had this gift. He could take the mouse and he could draw it because he had a couple meta global awarenesses. One was charming and human-like caricature. But how do you translate that down into the mouse at the detail level? Well, he said have big eyelashes that are long and that blink, and have a little little chubby chin that when it smiles it has, the straight teeth of a human. So he was meta-detailing. And that was his genius as a graphic artist, to be able to create something that was very attractive. He could hold the larger frames and detail it down to those details. He was doing both, the global and the detail at the same time. And that's what each of these 11 meta programs, as we invite it, so that to really become, to self-actualize, I need to have options that I can procedurize. I need to have procedures I can optionize, to invent some words. Because we don't have words hardly for the synthesis. Our words tend to be very dichotomized in that way. So by putting that together and having that and being able to see something with both of those extreme frames at the same time is what allowed me to now synthesize, create that new synergy. I found that this same thing, meta-detailing with the global specific, it also occurs in the wealth creators. Wealth creators have these principles of wealth building, and they know how to detail it down when they're doing the business plan, when they're negotiating, when they're whatever they're doing. They have the ability to hold that in mind when they do the details. And so that meta-detailing becomes then the thing that brings out their best.
It almost seems like you would have to have the larger picture first before you can get to the details. But I heard you say something about getting the details and then come up with a larger picture.
So you're pretty global?
Yes.
Wherever you are, you'll see it in your turn, because it's just the way our glasses.
So you see global, but there are situations where you see the details and then have to expand to the global.
So the best technicians who can do technical work, that they think in the details first, but they always keep in mind the larger frame, so they do it in the opposite way. Yeah.
It's kind of like if you're going to be a workaholic, wouldn't you rather enjoy being a workaholic? So if you're being a workaholic, chances are there's no meaning to what you're doing. But if somehow you can create meaning out of what you're already doing,
right, then
that's the other side going. If you're already there as a performer, if you can come create some meaning to what you're already doing and start enjoying that, then you can make some changes.
Right.
You already have the feel of what that's like.
Right. So as you identify your meta programs on these 11 areas, and how far out you are, how extreme you are, it'll really identify where you're there. The diagram on page 10, you'll see the word disillusioned right there in quadrant 1, because that's where we're all born, undeveloped. We don't know what anything means, and we can't do anything. So we're undeveloped. Then eventually we learn some skills, and we learn, oh, that's what it means, or we learn what it means, and then some skills, and we move out. The pit of disillusionment is there in that same quadrant. When people move up to the creator level, and especially the dreamer level, they dream, but nothing comes of it. They dream, and nothing comes of it. And they have this plan, that plan, nothing comes of it. Eventually, for all their dreaming and creating their mind, they start to get disillusioned, and they fall back to that pit of disillusionment. And then they're not actualizing because of the trauma, as it were, that they've created, that they've experienced there in that because it doesn't lead to anything. They don't know how to actualize it. People who are the movers and shakers into the performers, if they overdo it and now they become obsessive with it, compulsive with it, and they become workaholics, after a while they just get so drained, and it's not inspiring anymore. It's not meaningful anymore. It's not significant. Why am I doing this? And they start asking those existential questions. And so sometimes because of that, they'll come back to that pit of disillusionment and just throw up their hands saying, it's not worth it. It's not significant. And so disillusionment puts us back in that quadrant 1 because they haven't actualized the significance and meaning of it. And so if self-actualization, if actualizing your best is that combination, that optimum putting together of something significant and meaningful with what you can actually do. Now, the wonderful thing, and this is what I learned from Csikszentmihalyi in his work on flow, is that you can self-actualize the smallest thing so that you can have flow states with a conversation. Because if you can have a conversation and use your words to bring out the best in someone, and they bring out the best in you, and that conversation just seems like it's a wonderful just moment that's special and it's meaningful to you, you can have flow with a conversation, with walking in the wilderness, with checkers, with chess, with tennis, with the simplest thing. If your skills and competency is measured up against challenge. So in the flow chart, moving into that specific area where we're at our best, moving into what he calls the flow zone. If we have too much challenge, then we get into the anxiety zone, and we're overwhelmed because it's too much challenge. If we have more competence than challenge, then we're in the drone zone, and we're bored because it's not challenging enough, it's not meaningful enough, and we got more competency. So that's like being really good at tennis and you're playing someone who's just a beginner. So it's too easy. It's not challenging, so you don't get into flow. But if you played a world-class person and you're nowhere near their level, then it's too overwhelming. So it's that optimum utilization of, he uses the word challenge and competence, I'm using meaning and performance, that your performance and your meaning is appropriate to where your skills and your challenge is right now, and you feel good. You feel great about where you are because you're in that zone where you can get lost in that engagement. And suddenly, you're so caught up in that engagement, the world goes away, and time goes away, and others go away, and you're just present, fully present. And that can occur in the smallest of things, which is why we can actualize the smallest of things in our lives. So while I've encouraged you to pick out some things that you really want to be unleashed from, you can use this same model for the smallest of things. Because you might want to pick out just, and do it around maybe asserting something that you want, or negotiating. And actualize that particular meaning. And when you do that with many, many things, and you start living a self-actualizing life, that is, everything you're doing is designed to bring out your best and to endow you with the richest of meanings. And you get that sense it's all meaningful. It's all significant. Everything I do, everything counts. And when you're there, you're really in the zone. And my belief is all kinds of things just start happening because you're so fully there and being yourself. So that's what we're going for, to be able to do that. I stumbled on a number of these things a number of years ago when, with metastates, we found the genius state or the flow zone. I had been suffering for years from writer's block. So that I even was doing some freelance writing, and so I would have an assignment to write, and I'd sit down and because I wasn't in the zone, and because some of the meanings and some of the frames, but once I learned how to step into that zone and protect that frame, I could just get lost in there. And that's what we're going for. And it is that combination of meaning and performance. And when you optimize those, then you can start unleashing all kinds of things. And that's the design.